So let's talk about font size and X8. So everything here is about delivering a message, and delivering a message is not, only about printing content. And when I say printing, it could be also just, showing on screen. It's also about being able to read that content. And for that means that the text that you're using for your content must be readable and legible. That looks a little bit like the same, but well, no. Readability. What is exactly what we call readability? Readability is related to how the font type is arranged, the typesets, and this is, the design of the font that makes this. And for this, you have several aspects of the font that are key to get a good readability. This is about the font size. Obviously, if the font is bigger, then it's easier to read. It's about the case. Is it, lowercase, uppercase, etc. The line spacing, so between different lines. The line length, how long is the line? If it's too long, it's difficult, but if it's too short, it's difficult as well. And it's also about color and contrast. So all of these aspects of a text, a character, have an impact on the readability. The second one, the legibility. So here we're talking about the legibility of the typeface, and this is really the ability to be able to distinguish one glyph. You know what a glyph is now, one glyph from another. And in that case, you have something that is called X8. And I will define just later on what is X8. It also has comes from the character width. If it's too narrow, it's obviously very difficult to read. It's also the font weights. And if the font is using serif or not. So if you combine those two, then this is how you can get a good readability and legibility. And as we just saw before, there are two vertical metrics that we use for the readability and the legibility. So for the font size, this is actually the size of the character. So it is how big it is, basically, and the X8, which is, as you can see in the drawing here, this is the distance between the baseline, so where the text stays, and a line that is called the median, which is actually the X8 is the size of the lowercase letters, and typically it's the letter X, and this is where the name comes from. Of course, as you can see here, if I use the N as lowercase, it's not exactly the same X8 because of the curve. Then you have, some overshoots, which you have in all of the other characters, such as C or other like that. So X8 really defines the height of a lowercase character. Why is it important? Because if you want to check what I would call the quality of a text, then if you could combine checks on the font size and the X8 as well, that would be really great, because then you have at the same time some measure on the readability and the legibility. What we know is that checking the X8 is more accurate because the font size can be affected in some condition and actually wouldn't give a good pre-flight result. I actually designed some files and I will show you that in a minute, and you'll see that you can actually fool the font size, which means that you could fool the pre-flight. X8 is actually something that is used by regulations, and especially in packaging, in food packaging. You have some text that are very important and where you should have a minimum size. So you should that the people can have access to what is there. And the X8 is the one that has been chosen in that case. The example is the regulation that we have in the EU, which is number 1169, made in 2011, and his nickname is Inco. You probably heard about Inco if you heard about that. And as you can see here in one of the article, it says that to ensure a clear legibility, the character must use a font size where the X8 must be equal or greater to 1.2 millimeter. That's for general package, and you have an extra rule in case the package is small. Then you have the rule is actually that you can go a little bit smaller, because in that case it's equal or greater than 0.9 millimeter. But with these things, you can actually check if your package is compliant to the Inco regulation, because if you have like text that are smaller than this, then you could be caught by, you're not having something that people can read. Let's go to the demo. So actually here, and by the way, here you can see that I have my panel with the glyph, and you can see the glyph of the font. And you can see that sometimes here, like for the character 9, you have 3 different glyphs. So you can have different shapes for the same character.
Let me add something to that, Christian. If you hover the mouse over it again, over one of these,
yep.
It's kind of an interesting view, because at the top it says GID, that is the ID of the glyph in the font. So that's the second number that I was talking about. And then you have Unicode, which is the Unicode, how that particular glyph is, what number that has in the Unicode table. So that kind of shows you the relationship between the two again. Again, you have an ID in the font, and then that corresponds to something in the Unicode table, and you see the glyph on screen. So it kind of very nicely shows all 3 things together.
Thank you, David. Here on that example, I actually just made some text, and here I have a text that is, as you can see, in 24 points. I have here the same text using a different font face. It's italic, but it's still 24. And here I did something that I shouldn't do, I know, but I know that some people are sometimes doing this. They don't have italic, and they made that artificially. And here, and I have to push that so I can show you that here. And here, it's actually the font that I have here, the regular one, that has been skewed by 10 degrees just to look like an italic one. So I made a PDF out of that one. And as you can see here, if I use, for example, here, pit stop just to show the font size, you can see that the font size is 24. That's correct. And here, 24 as well, still correct. But if I look at that one, oh, it's actually 24:37. Because of the skew, then it had an impact on the font size, which means that although it was a 24, it's seen here as being 24.37. Okay, that's quite interesting, but let me show you something even more interesting. Let's look at another engine here by using a PDF toolbox. If I select that one, you can see that the font size is 24, still okay. I select that one, it's 24 as well, perfect. And I select that one, oh, it's 23,635, whatever. Oh, that starts to be weird, because it was 24. Pitstop sees that as being bigger than 24, and PDF Toolbox sees that as being smaller than 24. So this is where actually you can have bad results. Let's say that I have a pre-flight profile and I say our text must be 24. It will actually be okay if I use pit stop. But if I make the same profile with PDF Toolbox, the pre-flight will fail, which is not good. Let's have a look now at the X8. So I actually designed some action list. So modern good pre-flight tools such as Pistop Pro and PDF Toolbox, they have actually checks on the X8 as well. As you can see for those three texts, you don't see that text here because I did some trick. Just it's not taken into account. So here I have those three texts, and as you can see, all of them they have the same X8. So that means that even though I had some slightly different values for the font size for the X8, it's still the same, which leads to the fact that it's a better metric to use as a pre-flight thing. Here you can also see that in the callas inspector, there are different units actually to show the X8s. This is actually here the number that you find in the font. And in that case, you can see that even though, again, the font size is different, the X8 here is 486, and this is the same here, 486. And here, come on, 486. And believe me, the 486 here is equal to the 4.11 millimeter I had in the other software. So that demonstration, again, just to show you that font size and X8s are two things that are important to determine if a text is really easy to read and understand. But if you want to have really things that are related to regulations and you need to have a perfect result when you pre-flight, you should rely on the X8. Any questions?
I have one actually. So what you're saying, if I understand correctly, is that the X height is used in that specification in the standard because it's not as easy to fool it than using the regular font size. Yes.
Yes, it's one of the reasons. It's also one of the reasons is that you can have a font that has the same font size, but where you have a very small X8, and it's more difficult to read that than if you have another font, so another shape, where you have the same font size but a bigger X8. So that's also because those two are linked. If I look at the fix-ups actually here, you can see that it's on the checks, sorry. This is one check that is coming with PDF Toolbox. And you can see here you have the explanation. And actually you see that pre-flight check is really referring to that regulation I was talking about.
Yeah. So it's mostly important for people who have to obey that particular regulation in that case.
Definitely.
Okay. There was another question that I don't think we really talk about, but maybe I can hijack your topic because you talk about readability. There was a question on how hinting comes in and where hinting gets applied. I don't really think we have a topic about hinting. Maybe just to add two sentences about that, hinting is already, it's a part of the font. So if you look at the embedded font program, the hints would be part of the font program. And they are there to correct character shapes if it's necessary. they happen on top of everything else when a glyph is drawn. So it doesn't really have to do with encoding or anything else. It is just that when a glyph is drawn on screen, then the hinting instructions that may be in the font, an example would be all of the legs of the letter M need to have the same amount of pixels in the width direction. That hinting is then used to draw a nicer glyph than you otherwise would be able to.